Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you're joining us from, and on behalf of the Society of Neuroscientists of Africa, I would like to warmly welcome you to the SONA Webinar Series of 2026. We're continuing after we started last month, and it's a pleasure to see you all join us today from across Africa and beyond. Thank you all for making time again to be part of this session. I am Dr. Rehan Falari. I'm an assistant professor of anatomy at the University of Global Health Equity in Rwanda, and I currently serve as the treasurer of SONA and the coordinator of the SONA Webinar Series. So it's my pleasure to serve as your moderator for today's session. And for those who may be joining us today or hearing about SONA for the first time, SONA stands for the Society of Neuroscientists of Africa. It is a continental scientific society that is dedicated to advancing neuroscience research, education, collaboration all across Africa, as well as beyond. So the society tries very much to bring together researchers, clinicians, educators, and students, anyone who has interest in understanding the brain and nervous system. So it brings them all together. And one of SONA's core missions is to strengthen neuroscience capacity across the continent, while also promoting collaboration within Africa and the global neuroscience community. And certainly one of such initiatives with which SONA seeks to advance this mission is this webinar series you're joining us in. The series is designed as a platform for knowledge exchange across African neuroscience community. And in this series, we alternate between scientific research presentation like we did last month and career development discussions like we are having today. So participants can always benefit from cutting-edge science, from guidance on navigating careers in neuroscience. So we are very intentional also about diversity of speakers across Africa, across different regions in Africa. And as much as possible, we try to represent the diverse disciplines within neuroscience. So our goal is therefore to showcase the breadth of neuroscience research that is taking place across Africa and to encourage interaction from institutions, from sub-African regions, and different career stages. So before we proceed, I must remind you that at the end of today's webinar, a short feedback form, which you're quite familiar with by now, will be shared, and I will strongly encourage everyone to take a moment to complete it, just like you did for the one we had last month, which was the first in the 2026 series. We really appreciate and value your feedback greatly, and we do that because it helps us to improve future sessions. And for participants who may be interested in receiving a certificate of participation, you can be rest assured that that is provided almost immediately after completing the form. So with that said, it is now my pleasure to be joined by Dr. Rachael Dangarembizi, who is our great speaker for today. Hi, Rachael, how are you?
Hi, Rehan, and thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
I hope you're doing great. We're glad to have you here.
Really honored, and yeah.
Yeah, so
it's such a pleasure to be here.
Our speaker today, thank you so much. So our great speaker for today is an associate professor of neuroscience at the Neuroscience Institute, the University of Cape Town in South Africa. Her work and experience spans both scientific research and broader engagement in the African neuroscience space, particularly in areas related as well to strategies, core neuroscience, capacity building, and impact. And that's why in today's session, she's going to be speaking on the theme about navigating science in Africa. She's going to be sharing with us her reflections on the strategies, resilience, and impact. Of course, you can always, you can take it for granted that this talk will provide important reflections on what it means to build and also sustain a scientific career within the African context, without shying away from the challenges it comes with, as well as the opportunities, some of which have been untapped, and the strategies that are required to make meaningful impact. So before I hand over to our speaker, just to lay the ground rules, so that you know that Dr. Rachael is going to be speaking for about 40 minutes. And after the talk, we will open the floor to take your questions. So I'll particularly encourage you all, our participants, to start posting your questions in the chat, and we will take them in the order they appear. So please stay tuned, start dropping your questions as well as feedbacks. And at this point, without further ado, it is my pleasure to invite our speaker to deliver today's presentation. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rohan. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Rachael Dangarembizi, and I'm speaking to you from Cape Town, which is currently very, very cold. Hence, all the jackets and everything in the office. But I'm going to be talking to you a little bit over the next 30 or 40 minutes about navigating science in Africa. And this is really coming from my own personal reflections on strategies that I've seen working for myself and others, what resilience means and why it is important, and why in everything that we're going to do, we should strive for impact. And my talk is divided into about 4 sections. I start off with looking at context, the African context, and why it matters, and I will give my reasons for that. I also will look at the African research landscape, what it means, what it has, what challenges it has, and what opportunities as well one may look out for. And then I have been asked to give a brief personal intro, so to introduce myself, where I'm from, what I do, and why I do it. And then after that, I will then go on to the strategies for navigating a research career in Africa, targeted at early career research scientists, but also happy for other senior members or mid-career members of the neuroscience community in Africa to chip in and share their own experiences and their own strategies that have worked for them. We'll end off with a summary at the end, and then hopefully there'll be plenty of interactions and questions and discussions afterwards. So starting off with this question of context, I believe that our history shapes who we are, and who we are shapes what our future will look like. Most of you will know that the Africa that we're looking at today is not the Africa that we had 50 or 60 years ago. A lot has changed. 60 years ago, we were in the colonial periods, and the laws and policies, particularly around education and social justice, were completely different from what we have now. So whenever I reflect on anything, be it the development of science or education, I always want to go back to where we started from and how that shapes where we are today. Africa has a history of segregative educational and geographic separation laws, which basically were meant for training the person of color or the Black person more towards vocational rather than academic or scientific kinds of careers. So when we look at ourselves as scientists today and try to reflect back to where we came from, we can actually see how it was a prohibitive environment for people to develop as scientists or as academics. Now, that is important, and I've thrown a number of examples there, and they're not at all exhaustive. I've brought this because it matters, and it shapes our current state of education. The pipeline for scientists is coming from our history. The training for mentors who are mentors today is coming from that history. We have a lot of inequality still, a legacy of that history that we had. We still have issues of access to education, to science education, to neuroscience education, to role models, to support, and all of that is shaped by that history that we had. So most of the African neuroscientists that you're going to find are first-generation scientists. That means that they're pathfinders. They're trying to find their way around neuroscience. And they have lived with very little support in terms of networks, in terms of collaboration. If you're an early career researcher starting, this is sort of the landscape that you would be getting into. And it has got its good things and as well as its bad things. And that's what we'll try to strategize how to navigate. But continuing with this context issue, maybe the question that you may be asking yourself is, in what context are we working now? Because that was historical, that was colonialism. How about now, 60 years later, where are we? Post-colonial Africa is very unequal. And I've shared a picture here that is a common scene in so many African countries. We have a huge inequality gap resulting from both historical as well as non-historical causes. I won't go into that, but current politics is also shaping this inequality landscape. So on the right-hand side of this image, you see an informal settlement, and this image is taken from here in South Africa, which is one of the most unequal countries in the world, if not the highest, actually. You have an informal settlement where millions of people live under squalid living conditions with no access to clean drinking water or basic education or basic healthcare, limited food security. There's also a huge burden of disease. And just across the road, you've got people living in absolute opulence, plenty of space, sprawling lawns, and that is the Africa that we live in today. It's not just South Africa, it's so many other countries that I've visited. And that on its own shapes the kind of research landscape that we're working within. It shapes the diseases we face in the different contexts. It should help to shape the research agenda. And it also develops different scientists coming from very different contexts. I personally like to start with reflecting on this because I started my own educational career on the right-hand side of that image that I just showed earlier on. Attending school in makeshift classrooms, living in communities, that didn't have clean drinking water for most people, living in communities where schools were kilometers, tens of kilometers away, or the nearest hospital would be 50 kilometers away. And so that has shaped my early life as a scientist growing up. Truth be told, when I was growing up, I didn't know what a neuroscientist was, neither did I ever think I would ever be a neuroscientist. But I am one of the few out of my whole community of hundreds of thousands of children that grew up in my community that has had the privilege to be able to access higher education and science and neuroscience. And I ended up graduating against all odds with a PhD in neuroscience from one of the leading universities in Africa. Now, I value both of these experiences really dearly because my very humble background provides me with an urgency, a clear understanding of societal needs when it comes to science. And the lived experience of people in this setting is not imagined for me. So I know what we need to do. My later life or latter life gave me the agency because through education, I got training, I got skills, knowledge in neuroscience that can help me to tackle the challenges that I faced earlier. So both urgency and agency are required to bring about this change, but this also needs an enabling environment. And this will lead me to a reflection of the African research landscape. Now, you might not agree with me about what the African research landscape looks like. It might be different for you, but I find it a dry and rough and rugged terrain. It is difficult to do research in Africa. And I say that with all honesty. Why is that so? For me, I find that we have very limited local funding coming from our governments for funding research and development. I think about 30 or so years ago, African countries through the African Union agreed that they would commit at least 1% to 1.5% of their GDP towards R&D. This is 30 years later, and we have not managed to get anywhere close to that. The highest funded countries like South Africa are around 0.7 of their GDP going towards R&D. So we're still quite far from achieving that. And if you want to compare that to the global north, where countries are between 3 to 4, even 5% of their GDP going towards research, that means that we're lagging far behind in local support for research. Now, you may ask yourself why that matters. Local support for research is what allows early career researchers to be supported in their early days with their ideas so that they can become discoverable by funders. It is the funding that supports the institution so that they can become productive enough that they can develop systems and structures that can support research. So if that is lacking and we're limited to just international funding, then it becomes very limiting to the African researcher as soon as they graduate their PhD. But I also want to always say, even if you do have funding, plenty of funding, let's say you strike a really big grant, doing research in Africa is still much more difficult than it is in the global north. Why? Because research costs in Africa are double or triple as much as they are in the global north. Research consumables, because they are supplied from the global north, they take double or triple as much time to reach us. So science or neuroscience research is made slower by that compared to our research counterparts in the north. But there are limitless opportunities for meaningful and impactful research. Because it's not a fully interactive session yet, we'll get to that. I've just thrown here a cloud of other challenges that one can face in the African research landscape, from inequality, as I was saying, to disinvestment for research and development, loss of expertise because of brain drain, and that's because there's a lack of career opportunities in institutions to soak up all of the talent that is there. There's also politics and policies that do not support science, that just make it more difficult for one to carry out science. I'll give an example. We use a lot of antibodies. If you buy antibodies and they come, they may spend weeks at customs or border clearance agencies sitting in the sun. Nobody really cares about whether they're supposed to be refrigerated or frozen. You get them after 2 weeks, they're just now soup, probably not useful anymore, and you've spent all of the little money that you had in that. So there are policies sometimes that do not support science, and that has to change. There are also other issues like global biases against science. The world has not gotten to a point where it takes African science or neuroscience very seriously. People still look at us, they do not understand how the science landscape looks like in Africa, or whether there can be good quality science that comes from here, and it's up to us to actually change that. But as I said, there are limitless opportunities for meaningful and impactful research. And I'd like to sort of draw on one of the challenges we have, which is a huge disease burden, especially infectious diseases. What it means is that if we've got a high disease burden, we also have opportunities for exploring as many diseases as we can at first hand. And that creates unique scientific niches. I've always said in Africa, if you're a scientist, you cannot run out of things to do. The fact that there are many challenges also means that there are many opportunities for finding solutions for those challenges. So you can find a unique scientific niche. We don't have to be, hustling and bustling or bumping each other's shoulders to fit into a scientific niche. You can find so many new ideas for finding solutions to existing problems. The fact that we have this high disease burden, for example, as well, means that we have access to clinically relevant cohorts. So science in Africa is easily translatable to the patient or to the person that benefits from it. We have real examples, clinical examples that we can use because they are at our disposal. We've got access to samples and tissue and patients that we can use their lived experience to answer our scientific questions. And that is a resource that the world needs, right, for growing science. We also have currently an increased global focus on equity and supporting partnerships with LMICs. And I think it's important for one to know that they can tap into this as an opportunity for growing their science or their career. So currently, people are looking for partners in LMIC so that they can have a global kind of take at their research questions. And this is a chance for African scientists to take advantage of that. Lastly, we are part of emerging economies, part of a young and a growing population. In fact, they say by 2100, perhaps half of the population of the world will be coming from Africa with the rate at which we're growing. And it's a very young population. And so there's plenty of energy, there's plenty of creativity and resourcefulness that we can tap into from the population that we have, sort of leveraging our population dividend. So in summary, in as much as I through all of those challenges in the previous slide, we can actually look at those challenges with a different perspective and turn them into opportunities. I'll quickly move on now to the next aspect of my research before we go to strategy, of my talk, sorry, before we go to strategies. And here I will be talking a little bit about my own research journey. I am, as I said, an associate professor at the University of Cape Town, and I am based at what's called the Neuroscience Institute, which was started only in 2019. I am the founder and the principal investigator for what's called the Crypto Lab. And this is a lab that focuses on understanding mechanisms of brain injury in neglected fungal infections, particularly cryptococcal meningitis. I've been the chair of the Southern African Neuroscience Society for the past 3 years, which I've really enjoyed. And I have also had the privilege to work with institutions or organizations such as IBRO and the ALBA Network in the recent past, because their missions align well with the things that I value most. And I have been honored to work with them really and to serve my continent in that sense. I've also worked with other organizations that advocate for capacity development in African science in general. And an example of that is the African Research Excellence Fund. If you're a PhD early career researcher in Africa and you don't know the Africa Research Excellence Fund, please reach out to me. You need to know them. They are important for capacity development and they've got plenty of opportunities that they can offer you. Going on to the scientific aspects. So as I mentioned, I started the Crypto Lab, and this I did about 5 years ago. I started the lab with less than 3 months of postdoctoral experience. So I never managed to have a long postdoc and to learn how the scientific world works. I just got a postdoc and straight afterwards got employed, which was great. But it almost felt like being thrown into deep, murky waters and learning to swim, basically. I did not know what I was supposed to do. And I needed to find a research niche that was different from my supervisor. So I settled on looking at neglected fungal infections of the brain, partly because of my PhD training prior. But I remember one of my mentors saying to me, "Why would you choose to work on fungi? Because they are neglected." It was such a bold move to tackle, fungi, because they are one of the greatest challenges that we have to brain health, even though they've been previously neglected, both in policy, research, in funding. Nobody wanted to fund fungal research. But again, this is why I say it's important for Africans to be part of the conversations of determining the research agenda, the global research agenda. We need to be in the forefront of advocating for research areas that are relevant to our people. I say this because if you look at the number of Africans we've lost over the last 3 or 4 decades to fungal infections of the brain, the numbers are really astounding. We have lost millions of Africans to just cryptococcal meningitis, for example. And every year right now, even with antiretroviral therapy, we are still losing about 200,000 people a year. And so the numbers of Africans we're losing are not trivial, but it is quite surprising that nobody in Africa was studying this disease. So I stepped into that space, and as I said, quite bold a move, and everybody told me that nobody would fund that. But we changed that. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've established the first lab in Africa that focuses on this neurocryptococcosis. We have secured funding to build actual facilities, physical labs, to procure equipment, that is state-of-the-art equipment, as well as to bring cutting-edge technologies to accelerate fungal research in Africa. We now use advanced bioimaging, omics, artificial intelligence, you name it, whatever can be done anywhere in the world, we want to be able to do it here and accelerate research for the things that matter for our people. That is our approach. Over the last 3 or 4 years, I have mentored or trained almost 30 postgraduate students, and they come from different countries, and they range from masters, PhD, postdocs, and some of them have gone on to create their own research careers independently. We've got international visitors or researchers coming to Africa now to learn about cryptococcal meningitis. And I think that is really powerful because we've created a hub for hosting both local and international researchers and clinical fellows. And we have, contrary to what everybody had said, secured significant funding through multiple international and local funders, and we're still awaiting far much more funding coming. So to summarize, our research has been based on tackling what has been neglected in African brain health. And I think there are opportunities for so many other infectious diseases that other young African scientists could tap onto. There are parasitic infections, there are bacterial infections, viral infections that are not even touched. So I invite people that want to chat about neuroinfections in Africa as a niche. I'm happy to take that conversation further. These are just images that I'm throwing of the different spaces that we've built or created, and some of the team members that are in my team. The team has grown tremendously beyond this. It's now difficult to get everybody into the same photo, but currently I've got a team of about 14 postgrads in the lab. But outside of the lab, or beyond the lab rather, I've tried to position myself as an advocate for capacity building in African science. And I have advocated strongly, with policymakers, whether it's at the United Nations, or whether it is at other, continental platforms where we meet with policymakers to invest more into African science. I have also represented the continent in various leadership roles, as I said, with different organizations, but also brought significant visibility to continental needs and to continental research. And I think it matters a lot. I've advocated, for example, for the Ebro World Congress. We put in a bid for that to come to Africa, and it is going to happen in South Africa, in Cape Town next year. Please, please, please make a date and come for the World Congress. It's the first time it is coming to Africa in almost 60 years of Ebro's existence. So it is not to be missed. Every African should make a point to come. There'll be plenty of opportunities as well for funding and travel support. So look out for them when they come out. Please apply. We would love to come and celebrate African neuroscience in Cape Town next year. But outside of that, I've also brought significant visibility to, as I said, continental efforts to build both neuroscience and science in general in Africa. Also worked with many organizations in neuroscience and beyond, as given in that example there. A few months ago, I also got the opportunity to get an award in science, a national award in science in South Africa, and I'm still pretty, excited about it. That's why I brought this slide here. This is me and the Deputy Minister of Science in South Africa. So really, so much has happened in the last 4 or so years from the time I started my career. I still consider myself a developing researcher. I've not at all made it, but I just wanted to share this, not from a navel-gazing kind of perspective, not at all, but from a position that says it is possible to do something significant and to actually grow a research career here in Africa, which I think is a question that a lot of young African scientists face. Do I go abroad? Do I stay? Are there any opportunities for me here? I think there are opportunities. I've had opportunities while I'm grounded here in Africa, and I think it is worth staying and investing in a career in Africa. But how do we do that? And this is the last part of my presentation, where I give from my own reflections and other things that I've seen from others that have worked for them, some strategies for navigating the African research landscape as hard and as dry and as rugged as we say it is. The main challenge faced by most researchers is funding, and we'll start with that already. The take-home message, in case you drop off, somewhere along this slide, the take-home message is that funding opportunities are few and far between. That's not a secret. In Africa, we have very little local funding, and that's in most countries, and that leaves only international funders. And international funding opportunities are extremely competitive, and they're looking for really good quality science. So you have to position yourself strategically to access that funding. You have to be discoverable, you have to be visible, you have to be competitive in order to be able to access that funding. So I'm going to talk a little bit about funding and how I approached it, and I hope that you can be able to glean and get one or two things that will also work for you. If you're an early career researcher and trying to set yourself up and position yourself for funding, the first thing I would say worked for me was to develop an independent research niche. Funders do not like people that still go ahead and do what their supervisors were doing. They want you to identify a problem, typically a problem, find a research question around that, and start developing it as your own independent niche. That way, you carve it out, you work on it, you develop it, and you can create a track record around it. That's the first thing that one needs to do. And how do you do that? You have to develop a research question that is driven by a research problem. Funders are investing. They are investing money into science. So they want to see the impact, they want to see the return on that. So people are not interested in just putting funding where there's anything that is interesting. They want to address real challenges and real problems that societies are facing and using science to create solutions for that. So if you want to create a research niche, find a gap either in knowledge, in technology, innovation or policy or practice, and then develop a compelling research question around that. What do we mean by compelling? I have to hear it, and immediately I should say, this is important, this is urgent, and this must be funded if I'm a funder. It has to be interesting, it has to be significant, it has to be challenging enough, but it still has to be feasible, and it has to be an engaging question that really shows how we can use science to find solutions. And I will tell you that takes effort and it takes time. If you are applying for grants last minute and the last 4 hours before the deadline, then you've not arrived at that. Developing a compelling question and a proper research question takes weeks, sometimes months of developing and reading and studying and putting everything together. You end up with a solid question that is compelling. You share it with others, with a community of other scientists, either in your field or outside, and you welcome critical challenge. Ask people to poke holes into your hypothesis, and if it stands, then it's likely going to stand in the hands of reviewers and in the hands of funders. The next thing is to also, while you're doing that, start looking out for what funders' interests are. What I notice with most researchers is that they wait for an opportunity to show up in their email inbox someday. It has to be the right funder with the right level of money, specifically asking for something in their area of research. That may happen once in a lifetime. People that have got a good track record of getting funding, they go seeking for opportunities. They go and talk to funders. They go and look for funders that are funding the work they do. They go and convince funders that are not funding what they do and convince them to come and fund the work they do. So fundraising for research is an active process. It's not a passive process. And you have to identify who your funders are, make a list, find their contact person, contact them, ask them about how many rounds they have, what kind of career stages they are targeting, what are their actual interests? Is it basic science? Is it innovation? Are they interested in capacity building? Or is it solving health or societal problems? The Wellcome Trust has got a different focus than does the UK MRC, for example, than does the Novo Nordisk. And so finding funders, knowing them in and out in their blueprint and their interests is really key if you want to identify the next funder for your project. Most early career researchers will face what's called the burden of proof. Why? Because most funders require you to show evidence of productivity. But like me, you may have just walked out of your PhD, done 3 months of a postdoc, and then suddenly you're applying for funding. You're just starting. You don't have any actual evidence of productivity or proof, but maybe you just have good ideas. And how I tackled that is point number 2 in my strategy: establish useful collaborations. You need a research presence, but you don't have money to produce your own output. So what do? You tap into collaborators. They give you access to resources that will help you to generate pilot data before you can independently generate your own data. They give you access to skills, techniques, and equipment that you may not have in your lab. Say you want to do something with bioimaging, and you know that Rachael in Cape Town has bought the first light sheet microscope, and it is the only one in Africa. You don't have to wait to get funding to buy your own light sheet microscope to answer questions related to that. Write an email to Rachael and say, I've got these samples. The next thing that I need to do really requires volumetric imaging, and I know that or heard that you've got a light sheet microscope. Would you be able to help me? I can tell you, people are generally really willing to help and to work with others and to collaborate. So you should leverage that. The last thing is that you also need good mentorship. Find a good mentor, because those that have gone before you, they know the terrain better. For me, what I did was to just cold email people that I didn't even know, people I had seen online that are leaders in my field. I wrote emails to them. Hi, my name is Rachael. I'm based in Cape Town. I'm doing this work. I'm an early career researcher, and I really need guidance and mentorship, but by people that are already leading in the field. Would you be keen to mentor me? Or, hi, I'm applying for this grant and I was hoping you would mentor me in this aspect of my research. And people respond, and they will actually connect you with their networks. So establishing useful collaborations really is important. If you are an African researcher, though, you need to ensure that these partnerships are equitable. We don't come from an equal world, so not everybody is going to be looking out for your best interests. Some people will also come and they have their own agendas or their own approaches that may not be very beneficial to you. I'll give you an example of what I faced in the past. People knowing that I've got access to specific patient populations and access to tissue from that, and they will say, oh, let's come and collaborate. And their idea of collaboration is just coming, getting access to those tissues and disappearing. And then after the paper is out, you just find yourself somewhere in between the authorship list. That is not equitable partnership. You should be able to advocate for equitable partnerships. See that the partnerships and collaborations you've got allow you to grow. And I know that that's not easy. If you're an early career researcher, I'm happy to talk about this in the discussion session. So just to complete and say, your network is your net worth. I know that is a statement that is overused in the business world, but in science, it's also the same. We are a community, and you have to build a network of people that can help you, that can throw opportunities at you, that can support you as you're growing, that can mentor you and say, you know what, that's not the right direction you're taking. Why don't you go this way? And that will make it better. But not just that, you also have to train people under you because they become a part of your network. I've had people that have trained in my lab and then they've gone on to work in other institutions or bioimaging facilities, etc. And we tap into whatever they will be doing, and it helps the lab back. So it helps to invest time in building the next generation because they become the network that we require. So we've talked about developing a niche, we've talked about leveraging collaborations, but now I would like to talk about leveraging small grants or seed grants. This is something that people don't do enough. That's how I feel. You're an early career researcher, it's the first or second or third year of your career, and you see a grant that comes up and it's only $1,000, and you say, that's too little money, and you don't apply. Or $5,000 and you don't apply. You want to apply for $1 million grant from the get-go. Chances of you getting that are very, very minimal. Why? Because funders want to see a track record of funding. And the best way to develop that track record of funding is to actually leverage small grants. You get it, it's a seed grant, you apply for it, you get it, you buy some antibodies, you buy whatever it is that you use for your research, you develop a little bit of pilot data, and then people will see that, okay, she has or he has an ability to manage funding, and they will invest more and more. I'll try and share very briefly my own experience with this, but I always want to give this example of the Victoria Falls. I come from Zimbabwe, and we have this mighty Victoria Falls, whether it's ours or Zambia's, that's the jury is still out on that. But the Victoria Falls actually originates in northern Zambia, close to Angola, and it starts like this is the little spring that starts the Victoria Falls, basically, or the rivers that then give the Victoria Falls. It grows and it receives water from this and that tributary until when it lands at the Victoria Falls, it is thousands upon thousands, if not millions, of hectoliters per second that are pouring. And that is the same, sort of trajectory that a researcher faces. You start off with small grants, you build them up. In the end, you can end up with these massive grants that people aim for. And I will briefly touch on that, though very, very briefly. If you look at where I started from, which is here, the very first grant I applied for was just $1,200, and it was a local university research development grant. My university has got that facility of building early career researchers, giving them small money, allowing them to, learn how it works in the research world and to develop a pilot data set, and then they can be competitive for bigger grants. And if you look at this, it's almost like a pyramid, the way it then grows. Just last month, this is not even 2025, but 2026, we got the biggest grant that we've applied for so far, which is £4.6 million. I'm a co-PI on that, and I'm the lead here in Africa. But what that just says is that we needed to have used that 1,200 in order for us to access that 4.6 million. Hardly do you get somebody that just jumps from 0 to 4.6 million. That's the whole point I wanted to bring with this. It's a little bit of vulnerability on my part. But moving on to the next strategy, as I am wrapping up and running out of time already. The fourth strategy that I thought I'd share is that you need to take time to develop the skill of fundraising. Fundraising is actually a skill. You have to learn to write compelling grants, to sell your ideas, to manage funders. You need to have a proper pitch. If anybody asks you what you do and why you do it, it should come out like this. And in a minute, you should convince them that I'm worth funding. Your elevator pitch, work on it. The why of why you do your research has got to be on your fingertips, basically. But when it comes to writing itself, you need, the skills to write compelling grants, to learn the language, to learn to write concisely, but with impact, etc. It takes time, and you have to learn it. You have to learn to sell yourself. It's a skill as well, right? It's almost like marketing. Your expertise, what skills you've got, what networks you have, because all of that is part of the resources you have. And you have to show relevance of the work that you do. Why should you be funded and nobody else? How urgent is it to fund your research? How important is the research you're doing? Why should it be supported? And how impactful is it, etc.? All of that should be known by you more than anybody else. And then lastly, in developing your skills of fundraising, you need to think like a reviewer. Means learning to find fault in your own work. And it's not easy at all. You write something, chances are you're going to feel this is the best thing that has ever been written on earth. Truth is not at all. If you take 2 days and come back to it, you will start to see the faults in it. So learn to self-critique, but also learn to get others to critique your work. The last strategy that I wanted to share is about shifting from just career development to legacy development. And I'd like to sort of qualify that by saying, I think Africa is not really needing more research participants. That's not what we're lacking. We're lacking leaders, research leaders who can advocate for our continental needs and shift policies towards, supporting science. We need leaders that can invest in developing the next generation and ensuring we've got an army of neuroscientists that will be working on the brain in Africa in the next 50 years. We need leaders that can develop systems that outlast them. People that after they're gone, whatever they set up will still be rolling and going. That is what we need. So we need to, as we step into our research, especially in Africa, because there's so much need and gaps, we need to shift from focusing on our own individual careers. How many papers have I published? How many students have I supervised? To looking at the legacy of neuroscience in Africa. So in sort of closing this slide, I'd like to say navigating science in Africa is not a limitation. It is an opportunity to define the future of global science. There's so many gaps and challenges that you have an opportunity to actually do something that brings a difference. I did promise I would summarize, and I summarize in a slide. I've told you that research is best shaped by context. Context shapes who we are, where we come from, and the research agenda. Talent is universal, but opportunity is not. You see that in Africa. They are powerhouses of intellect. Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, Zimbabwe, all of these countries, plenty of people that are really good, but opportunities may not be there. So you need to develop a strategy that determines whether you survive or whether you lead. And that strategy should be developed intentionally, and you should position yourself for opportunities. And then lastly, you need to leverage small opportunities, leverage your network and collaborators. And as you go through your scientific career, if it works out, aim to create a career, a legacy, or impact that will outlast you. I think this is where I'll end, and then I will happily engage. I think I've used up my 40 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rachel. That was, of course, as insightful as you would expect. We've had quite an amount of engagement as you were having the talk. And as we look forward to further question, just gonna ask this first one about what your motivation was, aside, I mean, you gave us how history shapes virtually everything and where we find ourselves today, right? And you came from a community where it's not common to find females. You didn't, first of all, know about neuroscience, and you came out so well as one of the few who would accomplish this much of resume that you have shared with us. What kept you going?
I honestly would like to start by saying I come from a community where there were smarter people than me that were really good, that just never got the opportunities that I got. So I was really privileged. I don't want to say lucky, I'm a little bit of a religious person. I think I was really blessed to get the opportunities that I got to be able to take the path that I took. And what kept me going despite the challenges that we faced was probably a strength I got from that humble background that I started from. The resilience that is built into each one of us by the challenges that we face or that we're born into. Most Africans are not born into, they're not born with a silver spoon in their mouth. They are born in struggling communities that are really difficult to get by. And that builds resilience that we should tap into as scientists. So when you're going through your scientific career, you will need a thick skin. You will need to be strong. And it's up to us as Africans to tap into, the struggles we've faced for basic survival and to translate that into science. I think that's how I can answer that. But there's been a lot of just God and people as well helping me. So definitely not a one-man effort.
Interesting. That thick skin part got me. So having to develop a thick skin. And just as a quick follow up to that, or before I ask that, let's quickly see what Franklin is asking here. He says, as a medical student still in the university with a tasking and strict curriculum, what is the best way to start my research career as a medical student?
If you're a medical student, I think the number of opportunities are so many because you see so many diseases that we don't even have a pretense of an understanding of how they come about. So looking into pathogenesis and translating that into clinical practice is one thing that Africa needs at the moment because of the huge disease burden. Looking into health systems and how we can improve diagnostics so that we can catch diseases early before people are serious or die is another thing. You can look into what is going wrong in our health systems, sort of from a policy perspective. And we need thinkers there. We need people that understand the medical field. So opportunities in Africa, as I said during my presentation, are so many. You can throw a stone and you'll hit the next opportunity, basically.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you're literally saying it could be addressed from a lot of perspectives, and then he has to take the theories of the pathology very serious as a medical student, and then reading around. Interesting.
Use
So I
your
have
skills
something.
and your knowledge, I think, is what I would say. Yeah.
Please say that again.
Sorry. No, I was going to say leverage your skills and your knowledge and apply them
Yeah.
to a research problem, and you'll find solutions.
Interesting. So we have something similar to that from Samuel Emmanuel. So as an undergraduate, perhaps maybe not studying medicine, so an undergraduate perhaps of biomedical sciences, what's the starting point?
I think if you're an undergrad and you're already listening to this webinar about research in neuroscience, you are in a good place. Find people that are doing work and collaborate with them. Be a part of a team that is driving a research question of your interest. Learn some skills, learn some research skills, right? Analysis of data, how the scientific thinking works and things like that. Those are invaluable skills that you can develop quite early. And right now, especially with the newer generation that is really good with tech and AI and things like that, there's no more undergraduate, postgraduate. You can apply AI and tech to real questions today and come up with solutions, not just for the continent, but even with solutions that generate income or generate money for yourself and for your research. So there are still opportunities for young people, especially with the entrance of AI into science, to tap into that for finding solutions.
Interesting. And that makes me want to add to this, the other point I was going to raise earlier. Growing up in a community where there are a lot of smart people around you, you were literally implying some sense of mentorship, I believe. Where would you say is the state of mentorship? How was it in your growing up? And then how is it now based on your years of experience in this field, the number of students you've had at undergraduate and postgraduate level? So if you could add maybe a historical perspective to the role of mentorship in this, yourself and how you find it now.
Okay, thank you. When I was growing up, I don't know if I mentioned, but I may have during the presentation, mentorship during career development while I was in primary school and high school was far from ideal. We didn't have as many people coming up and saying, you know, you can study the brain or you can do this. I see a lot of that today, which is really great. And that's, you know, speaking to the historical context are saying, that is the importance of having representation of African researchers so that they can be mentors for the next generation. We didn't have that chance. In the community where I grew up, I knew a soldier, I knew a policeman, a nurse, science, and many other things beyond that. You know, we didn't get exposed to them. So, but that has changed for the primary schools, perhaps. Now we have career development days and we have all of these scientists going to schools. It's not yet there, but I think there's more that we can do. As the neuroscience community in Africa, we have a big job of bringing neuroscience to the earlier years of education. Brain Awareness Week is one of the opportunities to do that. Going into schools, telling them about the brain, telling them about, you know, how the brain directs bodily function. We didn't have that. Then I move on to the time I was in college. In college, because now you have lecturers and you've got access to them and tutors, etc., conversations about career started forming. Not in the same way that perhaps it is happening today, I also think. We didn't have as much access to the internet as, you know, the generation that is here today has. So I think that's another good advantage as well for them. Then when I look at myself in terms of mentorship for my own independent research career, that has been hard because there aren't as many, you know, female neuroscientists that look like me that have worked in the same environment that I work. We still live, as I said, in a very unequal world. And in some places, you still have like institutions that are dominated by people of a certain race versus others, and you may not even have anyone representing you. So they cannot really tell you, you know, how to walk the walk. So I've found limited mentorship in neuroscience from women, for example, for women, because there aren't as many. It's actually very difficult. One has to look abroad, of course, for other women neuroscientists and work with them to understand how they navigated things. And it's important to have that representation. Then, you know, mentorship based on expertise is another thing, because there are different types of mentors. There's people in the field that know the field so well, have been there for 20 years. And if you're in the UK, you're in the USA, you're likely to find that a stone throw away. In Africa, maybe not, because we're all pathfinders. I've just started a lab on cryptococcal meningitis and nobody else was doing it. It means I have to find all the parts and deal with all the challenges. And that is really difficult. So yeah, I think I've gone on and on, but I've tried to give as long, you know, a trajectory of mentorship as I've faced. Bottom line, find a mentor.
Yeah, so
the world.
And maybe in a couple of sentences, if you could just add to that, for the younger ones now, what should they seek in a mentor? Like sort of a brief advice on the need to search for mentors and how should they conduct themselves in that regard?
Okay, I think it depends on what kind of mentor you're seeking. There are mentors that help you to navigate your career, as in your personal career growth. And that's for me where I was saying, having a woman that I can discuss issues to do with starting my family, when to have children, how does that impact my publication rates and things like that. That's something I cannot discuss with the next men, you know, that can mentor me. And so there are mentors that tap into that personal development aspect. And you have to look for somebody who's as close to that as you are, that can say, you know what, when I did it this way and it worked for me, or it didn't work for me. But then you also have mentors based on expertise, scientific expertise. I'm a neuroscientist working on fungal infections of the brain. I'm not a mycologist. I don't understand fungal biology as much as other people in the field. So I found myself mentors in the fungal biology space, people that understand fungi in and out. And my work is sort of mirrored with the work that they do. And they look at it, they critique it, and you need experts that can be able to give feedback on your science from different aspects. You need neuroscientists in the field. You need, so there are mentors based on expertise. Trying to think of other mentors as well that you can have. You can get a mentor based on funding, just somebody who's done really well with securing funding. They've got that skill, they know the landscape, and you can lean on them and they can guide you. Yeah, I think there are very many different ways of looking at it, but depends on what you want in a mentor. Other things that one has to
Thank you.
include
Go ahead.
also availability. It's not, it's just to have a mentor that is just a name and they never meet with you, they can't make time for you. So it also has to be somebody you've got a relationship with, or you can build a relationship with, to meet regularly and to discuss your science or your personal development. Yeah.
Thank you. That's quite impactful. So there are times I believe that you have some periods of uncertainty, I guess, whether in funding or career progression or research direction. How would you say you have personally navigated those periods of uncertainty?
Those are really difficult moments sometimes, to be honest, Royan. Most researchers, and I'll tell you from having talked to other people that are really well established as well, they face an imposter syndrome. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but just the feeling that I'm not good enough, I might not be the right person for this, and maybe I will be discovered that I'm actually not that good. And it follows many a scientist every day. So sometimes I feel like that as well. I'm like, who do I really think I am starting this big program in cryptococcal meningitis? And will I be able to manage it? And I'm just an African. I'm just in a difficult environment. How I've navigated that, Royhan, is a little bit unusual. Because I know how it can get to me, and I can start, fighting in my head about things that I know and self-doubting. I've created a power folder where I put some of my successes that I get. It can be a letter coming from a grant or something that says, congratulations, you've been given this grant. We really found your presentation to be, I save all of those good moments sometimes. Then when the storms hit, I can go back to those and I can get a little bit of inspiration again that takes me from that gutter where I'll be feeling defeated, because sometimes you get a rejection for a grant. That's part of the system. It just works like that. And so when I'm feeling defeated, I sometimes go back to my successes, few as they are, and I try to look for motivation and inspiration from that.
Thank you so much. The advantage of this webinar is that it's readily available immediately after for people to listen all over again. One thing I want to add very briefly to that by way of question is you talked about what some mistakes that some earlier career scientists do commit, to talk about grant application, a deadline, and stuff like that. Can you think of some other things, maybe one more, or two or three, that you could quickly mention as mistakes that early career scientists usually fall into?
I think early career researchers should realize that their early career researchership is not a permanent status. It ends. You have a very short window during which the world is very sympathetic with you that you're still developing. And if you don't make something out of that small window, it becomes incredibly difficult to still try and get funding. So that window of opportunity, as soon as you're done with your PhD and you're starting your research career, tap into it. There are so many programs that are just meant for supporting early career researchers. And I can tell you for sure, for example, EBRO grants, right? A lot of them
Yep.
are for supporting young researchers so that they can grow independence, they can develop. But sometimes you don't get as many people applying for such opportunities because they're just waiting for the next big thing to happen. So, number one, leverage that period, that plastic window where everybody wants to support you so that you can develop your career. The second thing is not intentionally developing the skills that are required. You know, the science is one thing. Knowing that trypanosomiasis works like this or cryptococcosis works like that is one thing. Succeeding in science requires something a little bit further than that. Developing the right networks, ensuring that you are visible and that you are leading, having the voice to, you know, advocate for your research and sell your ideas. And those are skills that are not taught in school. And also, they are skills that not all of us come with in terms of personality, right? It's not everybody that's an extrovert would just talk to people at meetings. So if you are an early career researcher, make yourself visible. Another way of making yourself visible is to serve. And that is something that has really worked for me. As I said, I've worked with different organizations, so many people. It helps to know people because it is people that make opportunities available and possible for you. So tap into networks, volunteer for, you know, some positions, whether it's the secretary of the society or whatever it is. You're not paid for it, understandable, but it does help you to get the connections that will drive your career to growth. And I don't know if I've already given three, but another challenge maybe that is faced by early career researchers, as I said, is not having an actual niche that they're working on. Um, you need to find an area, stick with it. At first, it's going to be really difficult, but take time to develop it, to find the people working on it. And if you do it right, it can be really rewarding. So avoid overcrowded research areas, so to speak. Take the courage to tackle some questions that have been unanswered. Yeah, I think, yeah, those are the mistakes that I can think of at the top of my
Thank you
head.
very much. That has touched a lot. Yeah, that has touched quite a lot of areas. And I'm really glad that you summarized it that way. The final thing, we are already slightly above the hour, is you talk about the Ebro Congress, and it's great. And congratulations again for steering that leadership of hosting us in South Africa come next year, 2027. So, how relevant is this to a student scientist, for example? Why is it important to show up at a conference, albeit, I mean, topless of a big congress like the Ebro? Is it relevant? What should be the mission? How should they seek to get themselves there? That'll be the final question. And
The Ebro
perhaps you
World
have some
Congress.
monies to help with.
Yes, I'll talk to that. The Ebro World Congress presents an opportunity to get world-class conference with almost between 4,000, perhaps 5,000 people in one place from different aspects of neuroscience that you can think of in one room. And if you want to get to a place where you can find opportunities, tap into networks, find mentors, find funding opportunities, get to hear the state of, you know, science and neuroscience, get your work to be seen and visible, get to market yourself and sell yourself to people that can really change your research trajectory, the World Congress is the right place for you. It's extremely difficult to get funding to go to international conferences because it's quite expensive to get all of these flights and an end. And we've advocated to have a meeting in Africa so that plenty of Africans can be there. Number one, their science can be visible and the world can see that there's good neuroscience happening in Africa. So I'm inviting all of you, bring your good science. Let us showcase our science to the world so that they can take us seriously. But not only that, so that we can also share what we do and what we do well. So if you're an early career scientist and you want to come, make a date, September 2027 in Cape Town. There will be opportunities for funding. We obviously will not be able to fund everybody, but there are plenty of travel grants that will come up, and you have the opportunity to apply for that. So please apply. You have to be in it to win it. And there will also be a lot of training opportunities for young Africans. We have talked to different training partners that will bring schools or workshops or things like that close to the World Congress. And they will fund African researchers from all over Africa to come to be trained prior to the World Congress and then thereafter to attend the World Congress. So tap into those opportunities, and I look forward to seeing you in Cape Town in 2027.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rohan,
to have you
me
here today,
everybody.
Rachel. We are grateful for all of the insight. Yeah, and for everyone who has attended today, we are very grateful that you were able to make it. Thank you for being with us and for your questions. And certainly, we can always reach out to Dr. Rachel. She's very much accessible. She can be very busy. The last time we spoke, she's always in the air at one point or the other. So, but whenever, well, you carry your research with you whenever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so please reach out to her. She's very willing to be a mentor, so long as you have some interest in fungal research or something else like that. So thank you very much, Rachel, for being here. And please stay tuned, everyone, for upcoming sessions in SONA Webinar Series. As you may have noticed in the chat, the link for you to share your feedback and get your certificates has been dropped. Kindly make use of it, and you'll get some QR code your email. So as we continue to navigate science in Africa, may we do so with clarity, resilience, and a shared commitment to impact. Thank you all once again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Have a wonderful day or evening wherever you're joining from. Bye, everyone.
Bye.